Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack something absolutely fascinating, the academic search for the historical Jesus. Whether you're approaching this topic from a place of deep personal belief or just pure historical curiosity, you really can't deny the sheer impact of this single figure on global history. So today, we're going to triangulate modern scholarship, chronological evidence, and first-century cultural politics to reconstruct the life of a first-century carpenter from Nazareth.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap. We'll kick things off with the quest for history, then move into constructing the timeline, explore politics and ancient masculinity, cover the final days, and finally wrap it all up with the scholarly debate.
Section 1. The Quest for History, Separating the Man from the Myth. We have to start our investigation by looking at the exact methods used by modern historians.
This academic movement is often called the Third Quest. Basically, these historians analyze the Gospels purely as ancient historical sources, reading them the exact same way they'd read a text about, say, Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great. Today, there's just a massive flood of peer-reviewed journals and books dissecting these primary sources. And what's really required here is for academics to temporarily bracket off their personal faith or their lack thereof to strictly evaluate the historical evidence. They aren't asking, is this inspired by God? They're asking, what can we actually prove happened in first-century Judea?
And that brings up a really crucial distinction, brilliantly captured by Professor Helen Bond of the University of Edinburgh. Scholars make a firm, hard line between the human carpenter of Nazareth, who literally walked the dusty roads of Galilee, and the theological figure that developed over 2,000 years of Christian speculation. Our focus today, strictly on that historical man.
To find that man, historians use some pretty rigorous criteria. For instance, they look for major themes that repeatedly show up across a variety of independent ancient sources. That's a method called multiple attestation. They also situate him squarely within first-century Judaism. John Meyer does an incredible job of this in his monumental work, A Marginal Jew. Other scholars, like N.T. Wright and Craig Evans, heavily analyze the controversy narratives in their historical context. And then you have intense debates over the historical reliability of the texts themselves, pitting scholars like Bart Ehrman against Michael Bird. It's like putting together a giant puzzle to construct a highly probable profile of the man behind the movement.
That brings us to Section 2, Constructing the Timeline, Dating a First-Century Life. Because to really understand this profile, we have to know when he actually lived.
Well, historians absolutely love a good anchor point, and they found a major one pointing to the year AD 27. Based on the Gospel of Luke's very specific reference to the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, combined with the Gospel of John's reference to Herod's temple being under construction for 46 years, scholars widely agree on this. Jesus began his public ministry around AD 27 when he was roughly 30 years old.
So how long did that public ministry actually last? To figure that out, historians utilize the chronological framework of the annual Jewish Passovers, which are listed specifically in the Gospel of John. By tracking these annual feasts, scholars calculate that his public teaching lasted roughly 3 years, coming to an end in AD 30.
This 3-year span builds perfectly into a really famous framework by historian James Stalker. He structured these years beautifully. First, you have the year of obscurity, where Jesus is an unknown teacher gathering his first followers. Next comes the year of public favor. He becomes this wildly popular healer in Galilee, drawing massive crowds. And finally, the year of opposition, where he faces fierce, calculated pushback from Jerusalem's elite, pushback that ultimately seals his fate.
Moving to Section 3, Politics and Ancient Masculinity, Subverting the Alpha Male. We really need to understand exactly why that fierce opposition arose in the first place.
Picture this setting. You have a deeply patriarchal society living right under the iron fist of direct Roman rule. The priestly aristocracy in Jerusalem had some power, sure, but they operated under the constant paranoid watch of Roman governors like Pontius Pilate. During major festivals like Passover, the city was just bursting with pilgrims. Heavily armed Roman auxiliary troops were stationed everywhere. One wrong move, one sparked riot, and the local leaders could lose everything. I mean, the tension was absolutely palpable.
And into this powder keg walks Jesus, whose teachings were radically, almost dangerously countercultural. Think about it. In a world that idolized the dominating alpha male, where manliness literally meant glory on the battlefield, wealth, and dominating your social inferiors, Jesus completely flipped the script. He urged his disciples to adopt passive, subservient behaviors traditionally associated with women and slaves, repeatedly saying that the first shall be last.
As Professor Helen Bond points out, This complete inversion of societal values severely threatened the established religious and political order. By telling people to seek honor and service and manliness and putting others first, Jesus was practically dismantling the Greco-Roman social hierarchy. This wasn't just some nice spiritual message. It was a highly disruptive political one that put him on a direct collision course with the authorities.
Part 4, the final days, the Passion Week. This brings us right to the final week of his life in the spring of AD 30.
This period is so historically dense that the Gospel writers dedicate more than a third of their accounts to just these few days. Following his arrest late Thursday night, the historical record shows a dizzying, rapid-fire sequence of events. Jesus endured an overnight marathon of 6 distinct trials, 3 Jewish, 3 Roman. This middle-of-the-night legal process demonstrates a highly unusual, extremely hasty cooperation between the threatened Jewish leadership and the Roman governor. They were both super eager to eliminate a mutual problem before the Passover crowds could start a riot.
And the outcome they chose? Brutal. From a historical perspective, crucifixion was the ultimate stripping of ancient manliness and status. It was literally a slave's death, reserved for bandits and nobodies. Rome designed it not just to kill, but to entirely humiliate, emasculate, and shame the victim in the eyes of the public. The victim is made entirely passive, handed over, nailed to wood, and openly mocked.
Which brings us to our final section, number 5, the scholarly debate, aftermath, and analysis.
Historically speaking, a crucified peasant should have been entirely forgotten by history, yet obviously he wasn't. So how do modern scholars analyze this astonishing aftermath? Well, they're intensely divided. When looking at how Jesus understood his own death, scholars like Scott McKnight argue that Jesus explicitly anticipated it as a theological atonement for sins. But on the exact opposite side, critics like Reza Aslan argue that Jesus was simply a political revolutionary, a zealot executed for sedition against Rome, whose story was just rewritten later.
And the debate gets even hotter when we talk about the historical mystery of the empty tomb. Scholars like Michael Licona and Gary Habermas strongly defend the historical reliability of a physical resurrection, arguing it's the most logical explanation for why the terrified disciples suddenly started boldly preaching. Conversely, critics like Geza Vermes argue the early church didn't actually see a physical body, but merely experienced a powerful post-mortem spiritual presence.
So, whatever your perspective, whether you look at this through the lens of deep religious faith or through the strict, rigorous scrutiny of secular history, the sheer historical impact of this one life is staggering. It leaves us with one of the most profound puzzles of antiquity. How did the shameful execution of a first-century carpenter completely alter the trajectory of human civilization? I highly encourage you to dig into these historical sources for yourself and see what you uncover. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning.
Please remember to support our mission by clicking like, sharing this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to our channel for more updates.